Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Shimmery. Today I'll be doing my September wrap up. September was honestly such an amazing month for me. I think this is probably my best reading month of the year in terms of the quantity of the books that I read. Also in terms of the quality, but I definitely feel like the quantity is very much up there. But before I get started, if you are new to this channel, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below as well as hit the notification bell. But for September, I somehow read a total of 33 books, which means I read a total of 9,321 pages. Honestly, if I had just read like 2-3 more books, I would have hit the 10,000 page mark for just 1 month alone. And out of these 33 books, I gave 1 book 2 stars, 3 books 2.5 stars, 5 books 3 stars, 1 book 3.5 stars, 5 books 4 stars, and then I read 18 books that are 5 stars. So as you can tell, the quality is definitely up there as well, with a lot of them 3 stars and up. But I did read a few that were 2.5 stars, which honestly is not the greatest. I usually try to strive for 0 when it comes to under 3 stars, just because I tend to DNF books by that point. But this month I did bookopoly readathon, so at this point I believe my vlog should be up, so I'll link that above and down below in case you want to check that out. But a lot of the books I discussed in this video are in that reading vlog, so I'm actually not going to spend too much time rehashing the books again in this video, just because I talked it a lot more in detail in that particular video. So definitely check that out in case you're interested. But anyways, moving on to the first book that I read, and that is Once Upon a K-Prom by Kat Cho. This book I gave 4 stars. This is the book that I read for the bookopoly readathon, so like I said already, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I gave this book 4 stars. It was really freaking cute. I love the dynamics with the characters, the romances. The only issue I have with the book was in the beginning, when there's a lot of things about like the premise, like the problem in the beginning, that just had a lot of holes in, and it didn't really make a lot of sense in terms of what the character was thinking, kind of like how she was going about it and stuff, that I felt like it just made it seem like a bigger obstacle than it actually truly was. And that was kind of my issue with this book. But otherwise, it was a really cute, very quick, fun read. Next book I picked up is The Queen's Assassin by Melissa De La Cruz. This book I gave 2.5 stars. Again, I read this for the readathon, so not gonna spend too much time on it. But this book was slow. I didn't really care much in terms of the writing style, the pacing, the plot itself. Like, it was intriguing enough, but I feel like if it wasn't for the readathon, I probably wouldn't have really continued on with it. And if it wasn't for the fact that it was such a fast read, I also would not have continued on with this book. I also felt like there was a discrepancy between the writing style and like the maturity level and the characters, because the characters were definitely closer to like 20 years old. I want to say they were like 18-19 years old, but the book very much read like they were 13 or 14 instead. So that's quite a big age gap in terms of just how they reacted, what their thought process was like, etc., that I didn't really care much for the discrepancy. Then the next book I picked up is It Ends With Us. This book I gave 3 stars. This is a book that I did not read for the readathon. It follows a girl called Lily who didn't have the best life, but it didn't stop her from working hard and eventually owning her own business. One day she ends up meeting a guy called Ryo, and the two of them immediately have an undeniable chemistry. The only issue is that Ryo does not date, nor does he do any sort of relationship, but because the chemistry is there, Lily finds herself as the exception to this rule. But as the romance starts to continue, she finds herself overwhelmed. And intermingled throughout this entire book, there is a lot of flashbacks with her childhood crush, who also happened to be the first boy that she lost her virginity to. This was one that I did not understand the hype. I felt like it was an okay read, which is why I still gave it 3 stars, but I think that it was way too overhyped for me. I've also read other Colleen Hoover books and I think they were better. I just don't know why this one had so much more hype than the other ones, but the execution was more lackluster. The biggest issue I had was the romance. I don't know, I felt like I didn't care much for it from the beginning, and as the book continued, the romance just got progressively worse. And if you read this book, you would know what I'm talking about and what I'm referring to, but I was not a fan. I don't know, I just felt like also like the flashbacks between the present and the past with Atlas, I don't know, I just feel like the way how it was written was just very jarring to me. So yeah, I was not a fan, but it was still intriguing enough because I want to see how this whole story will conclude, especially with the romance between Lily and Ryo. The next book I picked up is The Sacrifice, which I gave 2.5 stars. Honestly, I was not a fan of this book either. I had such high hopes for this because I loved Vinci Pico's previous works, but this was not it for me. I also did read this for my readathon, so again, I'll link that above and down below in case you check that out. But I felt like the atmosphere was there in terms of the creepiness, the horror element to it, you know, the eerie factor, but everything else was kind of missing. I didn't really care much for the plot itself. I didn't care much for the characters. I felt like there was a lot of weirdness going on, and obviously that probably factored in with the creepy aspect and atmosphere of the book, which is fine, but I felt like there's a lot of dynamics between the characters that didn't make a lot of sense, and suddenly there were like crushes, they were like, I don't know, I felt like there's a lot of backstory that should have been there that was not there. It was like, this read very much like a novella where there should be a previous book talking a lot more about, you know, the story, the background of these characters, etc. And this is kind of like, oh, this is a little like what happened after, because also read very fast, like it reads very quickly, but yeah, this was not it compared to her other books. Next book I picked up is Perfect Little Children by Sophie Hannah. This book I gave 4 stars. This was such a freaking fascinating read. I was so invested. This is yet another book that I read for my readathon, but I really enjoyed this book. I was so invested with everything that was happening. I read it on audiobook, and right from the get-go I was like, I need to know what's happening. There is so much to the whole premise. It basically follows a woman who hasn't spoken to her ex-best friend in like 20 years, something like that. Maybe not 20, I think it was like 15 years, like 10-15 years. And you know, all these years goes by, and suddenly she happens to drive past their new neighborhood, and she decides to pop in and kind of like, she don't want to say hello, but she kind of wants to just like take a peek at their new life. And she stumbles upon her ex-best friend getting on the car with her 2 kids, who for some reason has not aged. They are still 5 years old and 7 years old, and she's like, what the fuck is happening here? So now she's obviously very like creeped out, and she starts to going down this rabbit hole trying to find answers. What happened to her best friend? Why are these, you know, kids the exact same age? Why have they not aged? What is going on? There are so many theories going on with like alien abduction, with genetics, with like some conspiracy plots, like a lot of like weirdness happening, a lot of theories happening, and I was so invested in the story. I thought that the execution was phenomenal, so I highly recommend this book if you're looking for something perfect for autumn. The only issue why I didn't give this book 5 stars is because I feel like the ending was very abrupt, and that's what I can really say, because you know, it is the ending of the book, but everything leading up to it was great. Next book I picked up is This Woven Kingdom, which I gave 3.5 stars. Again, I read this for my readathon. I felt like out of all the books that she's read, this is probably one of my least favorites. I read her YA fantasy, Shatter Me series, obviously. I read her YA contemporary. They're all great reads. I love them all. This book, I don't know, like there's just something lacking about the characters in particular, especially with the male main character. I just felt like there's just a lot of things about him and what he did and his like reactions and his like dialogue that just didn't flow very well in comparison to the entire story. I felt like the main character, she was great. I loved her, but everyone else was kind of lackluster. Next book I picked up is The Escape Room by Megan Golden. This book I gave 4 stars. This was a book that I absolutely adored. I actually thought it was so freaking fascinating. I did also read this for the readathon, so like I said already, a lot of the books I read this month I really prioritized for the readathon, so most of them are for that. But I really enjoyed this book. This was so good. The ending threw me off. I was like, what is happening here? I felt like I had so many theories in terms of like what was happening and who was behind everything, but it honestly kind of shocked me a little bit because I feel like I had a sense, but not really. It wasn't like fully formed in my thoughts, and so I didn't really like, it still caught me by surprise at the very end. So I was shooketh, and very happy that I read this book. Next book that I picked up is The Book Lovers, which I gave 4 stars. This is a book that I read for my book club, and I actually enjoyed this way more than I expected. I unfortunately did not finish this in time for my book club. I think I got to like 1/3 of the way in, and I was like, because I also got the book very late, like it never came through my Libby, and it got to my Libby like the day before my book club, and so by that point I was like, I didn't really have much faith in getting it. So I think like a day or 2 previously I ordered on Amazon just to see if I can get it earlier, and I got that like a day before my Libby audiobook came in, so I only had like 2 days head start to kind of like read. Didn't make too much progress, unfortunately, but it is what it is. I still really enjoyed it overall. I do think that this is one of the better Emily Henry books out there. I really enjoyed Beach Read, and then I read this one, which I also really enjoyed. And then I heard that there's that other one was like People I Met on Vacation, which apparently did not have the greatest reviews. That's the one book that I don't have and I have not read yet. So because of all the reviews, I'm also very like, do I want to read it? I don't know. But I'm happy that I read this one because it was freaking adorable. And I'm happy to say that everyone in my book club also really enjoyed this book as well. I feel like they didn't care much for the sister, and at that time I didn't get to that part about the sister as much. So I was like, I still like the sister, I think she's great. And they're like, no, there's more to her, you find out later. And I was like, honestly, I'm not really surprised, because in these type of books there's a formula. There's always like the meet cute kind of situation, and then there is like a misunderstanding, and then a reconciliation, and then a happily ever after. And it goes along with family members too, like not necessarily like the romance part obviously, but where there is some sort of like big misunderstanding or this whole like obstacle that they had to go through. So I'm not surprised that that happened for this book, but overall I just really enjoyed it. I love the love interest in this book. I love the sister. I feel like the sister definitely had her issues, but I loved how they reconciled and kind of like talk to each other throughout the book, and especially at the very end of the book when they kind of like understood where they are now and what they're doing, etc. I just love how the book concluded. Like it was just overall a really cute fluffy read, the perfect way to end the summer, honestly. Next book I picked up is Kissing Lessons, which I gave 2 stars. Again, this is a book that I read for the readathon. I think I only went through this book because this audiobook was like maybe 4 or 5 hours. It was a really short read, and with my like 2 times the speed, I feel like I barely did some work and then the audiobook was over. So I feel like that's like the only reason why I finished it, because otherwise I don't really care. I didn't care much for the story, I didn't care much for the characters. I feel like everyone was like super annoying, and yeah, unfortunately like it was not the greatest. But I feel like I didn't like absolutely hate it, which is why I didn't give it 1 star. I still gave it 2 stars because it was an okay read. Like it was not great, but it was still more on the okay scale for me. Next book I picked up is The Honey Don't List, which I gave 3 stars. I don't know why, but this book gave me such like Magnolia Farms vibe. I forget that name, but that like HGTV couple, I think it's like Joanna or Joanne and her husband like Chip or something. They're really cute, and I feel like this book kind of like used them as an inspiration, because it basically follows another very successful couple who are into interior designing, construction work, etc. And that follows the assistant of this couple and kind of like how she has like what she's done for the company, etc. and how they basically a family, but there's also so much tension between the couples themselves. There's a marriage issue going on, even though they just wrote a book about marriage and like communication and all that stuff, like relationships. So that's what the story is about. And honestly, like I like the premise of the book. I even like some of the execution of the book, but I felt like the main character herself was very aggravating. She was like what, like mid-late 20s, and I'm like, okay, I understand that, you know, they're almost like a parental figure for you because you start working with them at a very young age. They've been helping you, you know, like a lot of your life, but you need to think for yourself too. And I feel like she never once thought for herself, especially as you read more about the book and kind of like her true role in this company and like what she's truly done for everything, like what they've accomplished. You're like shocked by, or I was shocked by, how much she let them kind of like step on her and use her. And I feel like the entire book was just really about the assistant trying to gain some of that back, and some of her self back. I feel like out of all the books that they've written before, this is probably my less favorite one, I think, that I can remember. I feel like the other books I've written from them are been like cuter, you know, like The Honeymooners, for example. I think I gave that one like 4 stars, something like that. This was just like a 3 star, and it was barely 3 stars for me. Next book I picked up is The Dating Plan by Sarah Desai. This book I gave 4 stars. This was a very cute book that I picked up on a whim. I was looking for an audiobook, and this is just one that I picked up randomly. This is really freaking cute. This is actually the second book in the series, but because each book follows a different couple, I think they're like cousins or something like that, you don't actually get a lot of interactions between their cousin and like this couple, for example. So I didn't feel the need to pick up the first book first, nor do I feel the need to pick up the third book, because while this is a cute read, I don't think it was like amazing, and I'm like super invested with like the rest of the family, the big family too. It's not even like, you know, immediate family. It's like not siblings, you know, they're like cousins or like distant cousins or something. So this was cute, nothing much to say about it. I love the interactions between the love interest and her. It was very adorable. I also love kind of like cultural meshes between the two, because she's Indian and he's Irish, and you really just see the difference between their culture, especially their family aspect too, and how, you know, in Indian culture family is a much bigger deal. And not that I'm saying that in Ireland culture is not, but for his particular family, who's Irish, they were more like distance, and they definitely, not that they were like they didn't care, but it's more like they only were aware of things if they were stated, whereas for her family it was very much like in your face. Like even if you don't say anything, like if we feel like something's wrong, we'll like ask you and like, you know, heckle you until you find out. I mean, that's the whole reason why she decided to do this whole fake dating thing, because her aunties were all like, find a husband, you know, just show up with like a boy and be like, is he marriage potential? Like he seems like a nice Indian boy, maybe you can marry him, etc. They're very much like in your face, you know, all up in your business, etc. And like the two cultures are just not the same. So I just really liked how the author displayed that, because it was honestly kind of funny as well, just reading like differences and how, you know, love interest was like super into her family, because they always treated him as if he was part of their family as well, and he didn't really have that familial interaction as much growing up. So really enjoyed this book, highly recommend this one. Next book I picked up is Take Me With You, which I gave 3 stars. This was a thriller book that I wanted to read, just kind of get me started for October. I think I read it like a week or so ago. This was not really it for me. I mean, it was an okay read, but it wasn't as amazing. I feel like the premise sounded so fascinating. It's about this like group of teenagers who gets called into a room, and they find this like unknown cube there that tells them, basically forces them to play a game with it, and saying that you have to take me with you or else. And so the 4 of them, I think it's 4 of them, have to like take turns, you know, handling this cube and passing off to each other, and the cube will kind of like get information from their daily lives, you know, talk to them, just be aware of everything that's happening, etc. And as the story kind of progresses, you know, this cube starts to have a really weird interest in their secrets, and that's kind of the premise. Like I feel like the premise sounded so good. The execution though, I feel like it was halfway there. I feel like the first half was very well done. The second half kind of became a little bit stagnant for me. I feel like as things have happened, and as I try to find out like what is really going on, who gave us this cube, you know, like all those questions, I feel like that's when things start to go downhill for me. Like I just lost interest, to be honest. And like the very ending was like, oh, this is kind of intriguing, but not really. Like at that point I only continued because I already got to that point that I'm like, I kind of just want to know what's happening at this point. Like if it wasn't for that, I'd probably just be like, I'm going to DNF this book. But I do think the first half was pretty well done, which is why I still gave it 3 stars. Next book I picked up is Meet Me at Midnight. This book I gave 4 stars. This was a cute book that I read. I feel like that was really all to it. It's definitely like, you know, romancy, perfect for summer, another great way to end the summer, and as we go into fall now, very much in the fall season. Not really for California though, especially not for LA. It's very much still summer here, but either way though, it was a really cute book. I love the dynamics between 2 main characters. It was just really cute to see kind of like how they started off the prank war between the 2 of them, and like kind of the misunderstanding of how that even happened. And obviously as the story progresses, they fall in love, you know, like they get past their misunderstandings, they communicate with each other, etc. I thought the overall book was really cute. I can see why a lot of people enjoyed it when it came out a couple years ago. I'm a little late, but yeah, I definitely enjoyed this book. Definitely recommend it if you're looking for like a quick, cute, romantic read, especially in the summertime. Next book I picked up is Twin Crowns by Catherine Doyle and Catherine Weber. This book I gave 3 stars. This is another book that I read for the readathon. As stunning as that book is, the cover, I don't think the inside is accurate accurate reflection of that. It was a good read. I still gave it 3 stars, but it wasn't as amazing as I expected it to be. I also thought this was going to be a standalone. It is not a standalone. It is very much I think it's a duology or something. There's very much a sequel, but because I am not that invested in the story, I will not be continuing on with the series. That being said though, I do think that there were elements to this book that I did find very fascinating. I like the magic system involved here. I thought that was really fascinating. I also loved how I feel like usually when there's like magical animals or like animals in books and stuff, in fantasy books, it's like unicorns or, you know, like phoenixes. Like these were like snow leopards, which I thought was really freaking cool, and they weren't really magical per se. They were just trained to take down witches. Just another like opposite end of that, but like I just really enjoyed that element to it. I also love the sisterly bond, even though they grew up, you know, separate. They were separated at birth. I loved how once they got to know each other, there is a bond there, and how they were very similar yet so different from each other. And I just love how the plot progressed. But that being said though, I do feel like it was a lot longer than it needed to be, and I feel like this very much could have just been a standalone and not have been split up, because like I said, it was longer than it needed to be, therefore it could have been cut down and just like actually finish the rest of the story. So anyways, next book I picked up is Yes, No, Maybe So. This book I gave 3 stars. This is a book that I thought I would enjoy more because I feel like I tend to like cute romances, and while I didn't dislike it, I felt like there was a lull to it that I heavily considered DNFing. Obviously I continued on the book and I still gave it 3 stars because I like the political aspect to it. I like the romance and the kind of their interactions with each other, but other than that though, I feel like everything else was just okay, very middle of the road book for me. And then in terms of the 18 books that I gave 5 stars to, I read volumes 17 to 34 for Bleach. So obviously I think right now it's still beginning of October, the new Bleach anime comes out, I think like next week or something like that. I should need to find out like where I can watch that, because I don't think it's gonna be on Crunchyroll, so hopefully it's on Hulu or something like that so I can actually stream it. But because of that, like in lieu of that, I'm like trying to read the manga like right now, and I got through 18 volumes. I'm still on the roll right now. I think I'm currently on volume like 46, so definitely going to be a lot of books for October as well, just because of the manga that I'm currently reading, and I'm really hoping that I finish the rest of the series like end of this month ideally. But I am so intrigued to find out like what will happen next. Obviously I love everything about it. I love the story. I mean, for me, I feel like at this point Bleach is very much a nostalgic factor for me, since I watched the anime a long time ago, like growing up, and I've rewatched it and now I am just reading the manga and just like getting it ready for the new arc to come out. So it's definitely a nostalgic factor for me, but I love the characters, I love the storyline. I can't wait to see like how everything, you know, concludes. I think like the 1000-year blood war arc is like 2-3 years after the previous arc, so there's definitely some time lapse there, and I'm curious to see like how everyone looks now and like how they've changed, etc. So I'm very excited to see like where everything goes. But this is the series I gave all of them 5 stars because they're just so freaking good. But anyways, those are all the books that I read for this month. As you can clearly see, I read a ton of books. Let me know down below which books have you read. Have you read any of the books that I read this time around? Are you also excited for Bleach? Because I feel like not that many people are talking about it in the book community, but like I'm very excited for it. So let me know down below. But as always, if you like this video, please do give me a thumbs up. It really does help out my channel. And if you see more content of me, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below, as well as hit the notification bell. And as always, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.